On this day in history, we remember the remarkable individuals who shaped our world. Welcome to Who Died Today in History, where we honor their legacies. From artists to leaders, their impact lives on. If you find their stories meaningful, like, subscribe, and hit the bell to stay connected. Napoleon Bonaparte, one of history's most influential military leaders, died in exile on the remote island of Saint Helena on May 5, 1821. His death, from what is widely believed to have been stomach cancer, though some have speculated poisoning, marked the quiet end of a man whose life had been anything but. The fallen emperor's demise came far from the grand battlefields and thrones he once commanded, surrounded not by armies or admirers, but a small group of loyal attendants and British jailers. Napoleon's death reflected the fragility of power in an era defined by revolutionary upheaval and imperial ambition. A self-made ruler who rose from obscure Corsican roots to crown himself Emperor of the French, his fall was as dramatic as his rise. After his defeat at Waterloo in 1815, the Allied powers exiled him to Saint Helena, a rocky outpost in the South Atlantic, as much to remove him from European politics as to erase his influence from public imagination. The immediate consequences of Napoleon's death were largely symbolic. Politically, Europe had already begun to settle into the post-Napoleonic order established by the Congress of Vienna. Yet his passing reignited fascination with his legacy, especially in France, where he began to be seen less as a tyrant and more as a tragic hero. Over time, his image was rebranded, from conqueror to visionary, from exile to martyr. His death amplified his legend. Much like Julius Caesar or Alexander the Great, Napoleon's myth grew after death, spurred by romantic writers, artists, and later political leaders who invoked his memory. In 1840, his remains were returned to France in a grand ceremony and interred at Les Invalides in Paris, a resting place befitting the grandeur he always sought. Napoleon's end illuminates the human fascination with power's impermanence. We are captivated by those who chase glory and fall from it, and Napoleon's life and death serve as both caution and inspiration. Through paintings, biographies, films, and monuments, society continues to reckon with his complex legacy, an embodiment of ambition, brilliance, and the consequences of unchecked power. In memorializing such figures, we shape collective memory, blending fact and myth to understand our past and reflect on the costs of leadership, legacy, and mortality. Wynter, the elegant and poised actress best known for her role in the 1956 sci-fi classic Invasion of the Body Snatchers, passed away from congestive heart failure on May 5, 2011, at the age of 79. Her death was a quiet, natural end in the serene surroundings of her home in Ojai, California, a stark contrast to the high-stakes drama of the Cold War paranoia that defined the peak of her cinematic career. Wynter's most iconic role came during the 1950s, an era of anxiety over conformity, communism, and the loss of individuality. In Invasion of the Body Snatchers, she portrayed Becky Driscoll, a woman caught in a world where people are being replaced by emotionless replicas. The film became a cultural metaphor, reflecting fears about authoritarianism and identity loss, concerns that were deeply rooted in the zeitgeist of post-war America. Wynter's performance added emotional depth to the allegory, capturing both vulnerability and resilience. Her passing didn't spark headlines on a grand scale, but for film historians and classic cinema enthusiasts, it marked the loss of a bridge between Hollywood's golden age and a time of deep cultural introspection. While she did not command the level of global fame as some of her contemporaries, Wynter represented a breed of actor who brought intelligence and grace to their roles, often elevating genre films to art. In death, Dana Wynter's legacy became more tightly linked to the symbolic power of the stories she helped tell. The fear and alienation portrayed in Body Snatchers still resonate today, making her performance a timeless contribution to cinematic history. As society continues to wrestle with themes of identity, trust, and societal conformity, the emotional truths she portrayed remain relevant. The way we remember figures like Wynter reflects a human desire to preserve meaning in mortality. Though not immortalized in towering statues or political speeches, Wynter lives on through film, a medium uniquely suited to capturing and replaying presence. Through retrospectives, restored releases, and academic analyses, she is quietly honored, reminding us that memory often resides not just in greatness, but in the sincerity of performance and the truth of expression. Her death underscores how storytelling and cultural memory shape how we measure lives beyond the spotlight. George Jung, once a central figure in the American drug trade of the 1970s and 80s, died of natural causes on May 5, 2021, at the age of 78. His death came in a hospice facility in Weymouth, Massachusetts, far from the lavish lifestyle he once enjoyed during the peak of his criminal career. The quiet nature of his passing stood in stark contrast to the turbulent, high-stakes world he had once inhabited, a world defined by excess, secrecy, and risk. Jung rose to infamy as a key player in the Medellin cartel, becoming one of the principal figures in trafficking massive quantities of cocaine into the United States. His operations fed a growing drug crisis and fueled the U.S. government's war on drugs, a campaign marked by both aggressive law enforcement and controversial social policies. Jung's life and eventual incarceration became symbolic of both the allure and the danger of the era's fast-paced underground economy. The immediate consequence of Jung's death was largely symbolic. Having been released from prison in 2014 after serving nearly 2 decades, he had already become a mythic figure thanks in part to Blow, 2001, the film based on his life, in which Johnny Depp portrayed him. That movie helped solidify Jung's place in pop culture, not just as a drug trafficker, but as a tragic anti-hero, seduced by wealth and ultimately betrayed by those closest to him. Jung's death amplified his legend, not through grandeur, but through closure. It reminded the public that even the most notorious figures must face mortality and often obscurity. His story serves as a cautionary tale about the costs of chasing power and profit at the expense of personal relationships and moral boundaries. In reflecting on Jung's life and death, we confront broader themes about how society remembers controversial figures. We immortalize them not through celebration, but through storytelling, books, films, and documentaries that explore their choices, consequences, and humanity. Jung's narrative fits into a long tradition of flawed icons whose lives fascinate and warn in equal measure. Ultimately, his passing is a reminder of the impermanence of fame and the complexity of legacy. We remember George Jung not just for what he did, but for what his life reveals about ambition, regret, and the fine line between infamy and legend. Nick Cayman, the British model, singer, and style icon of the 1980s, died on May 5, 2021, at the age of 59 after a long battle with bone marrow cancer. His death, while natural in cause, came as a poignant reminder of the quiet tragedies that often follow those who once lived in the spotlight. Cayman, who rose to fame first as a Levi's jeans model and later as a pop singer, became an emblem of a decade defined by bold aesthetics, MTV-driven celebrity, and the blending of fashion and music. Cayman's death reflected the challenges of his time, the ephemeral nature of fame in the media-saturated 1980s, and the immense pressure placed on young artists to conform to a commercial image. His career had been launched to superstardom by a 1985 Levi's commercial, in which he stripped to his boxers in a laundromat, sparking a fashion and cultural sensation. This image of effortless cool led to a music career bolstered by Madonna, who co-wrote and produced his hit single Each Time You Break My Heart. Yet after a brief burst of fame, Kamen quietly faded from the public eye, choosing a private life away from celebrity culture. The immediate aftermath of his passing saw an outpouring of tributes, particularly from fans and fellow artists who remembered him not only for his style and music, but also for his warmth and humility. Madonna publicly expressed her sadness, highlighting their close collaboration and his quiet grace. In death, Kamen's image was revisited not as a fleeting heartthrob, but as a symbol of a vibrant, creative era. Kamen's legacy lies in the enduring visual and musical imprint he left on the 1980s. His life and death underscore how fame can be both illuminating and isolating, and how memory reshapes public figures after they are gone. We immortalize figures like Kamen through curated nostalgia, fashion retrospectives, music reissues, and social media tributes that revive their influence for new generations. Ultimately, Nick Kamen's passing evokes our complex relationship with mortality and memory. In commemorating his life, we are reminded that even those who burn briefly in the public imagination can leave behind echoes that shape culture long after the applause has faded. Sweet P Atkinson, the soulful voice behind the funk rock collective, passed away from a heart attack on May 5, 2020, in Los Angeles at the age of 74. His death, though natural, came at a moment of broader cultural reflection on the legacy of Black musicians who helped shape modern American music, yet often remained on the margins of mainstream fame. Atkinson's passing was not just the loss of a singular voice. It was a reminder of the deep roots and enduring impact of funk, soul, and R&B as vessels of both personal expression and social commentary. Born Hillard Sweet P Atkinson in Oberlin, Ohio, he began his career not in studios but in an auto factory, singing after shifts. His ascent to the music world symbolized the gritty determination of many Black artists of his era, navigating a music industry that often commodified their sound while offering little control or credit in return. Atkinson found his breakthrough with Voices, whose eccentric blend of genres was grounded by his rich baritone and expressive delivery. Songs like Walk the Dinosaur and Spy in the House of Love were not only quirky hits, but part of a broader 1980s wave that challenged musical boundaries and commercial norms. His death marked the end of an era in which musical experimentation, often born from underrepresented voices, pushed against the polished rigidity of pop. While not a household name to all, Atkinson was revered within musical circles, and his death sparked heartfelt tributes from collaborators and fans alike. His passing did not shift the global trajectory of history, but it reawakened appreciation for an artist who personified authenticity, resilience, and creative freedom. In the wake of his death, Atkinson's work has seen renewed recognition through streaming platforms and retrospective articles, showing how music immortalizes voices long after they are silenced. Tributes serve as acts of cultural preservation, ensuring that artists like Sweet P Atkinson are not lost in the footnotes of history. Ultimately, Atkinson's death, and the quiet reverence it inspired, underscores how mortality often crystallizes legacy. Through voice, rhythm, and resilience, he contributed to a cultural lineage that reminds us of the power of music to endure, inspire, and remember. Jean-Claude Pascal, the suave French singer, actor, and winner of the 1961 Eurovision Song Contest, died of cancer on May 5, 1992, in Paris. His death, though from natural causes, occurred during a period of shifting cultural attitudes toward both the arts and identity in Europe. Pascal's life and passing encapsulate the struggles of a man who navigated fame while remaining somewhat distant from the mainstream spotlight, and whose legacy resonates in the evolution of European popular culture. Born in 1927 in Luxembourg, Pascal rose to prominence in the post-war era, initially as a fashion designer before moving into acting and music. His refined demeanor and deep, expressive voice embodied the elegance and emotional restraint admired in mid-20th century European culture. His greatest international fame came in 1961 when he won the Eurovision Song Contest representing Luxembourg with Nous les amoureux. While the lyrics seemed to tell a generic love story, many later interpreted it as a coded message about a forbidden love between two men. An audacious act for the time, especially amid conservative social norms. Pascal's death came at a time when the conversation around LGBTQ+ rights and identity in Europe was beginning to gain more visibility, though still tinged with taboo. His passing highlighted how many artists of earlier generations expressed their truths subtly, constrained by the cultural boundaries of their time. In this way, Pascal's death not only marked the loss of a celebrated performer, but also reminded society of the quiet courage required to maintain personal dignity in eras less accepting of difference. The immediate aftermath of his passing did not lead to widespread public mourning, but among Eurovision historians, LGBTQ+ communities, and fans of classic French chanson, his memory endured. Over time, retrospective appreciation for his artistry and possible coded defiance has grown, especially in discussions of queer representation in mid-20th century media. Jean-Claude Pascal's life and death illustrate how memory and mortality intersect, how some figures are re-evaluated only after their voices fall silent. He is now honored not only for his elegance and talent, but as a subtle trailblazer in a Europe learning to look back with greater empathy. Through documentaries, Eurovision retrospectives, and digital archives, his legacy continues, preserved in song and story, reminding us how even quiet acts can echo across time. Chris Strachwitz, the passionate musicologist and founder of Arhoolie Records, died of natural causes on May 5, 2023 at the age of 91. His passing marked the end of a life devoted to the preservation and celebration of roots music, genres often overlooked or marginalized in the broader narrative of American culture. His death, while peaceful, symbolized the fading of a generation of archivists who worked tirelessly to capture the authentic voices of a diverse and often forgotten musical heritage. Born in Germany and immigrating to the United States after World War II, Strachwitz became enthralled with American blues, folk, Tejano, Cajun, and gospel. He founded Arhoolie Records in 1960, and through it, he gave a platform to musicians like Mance Lipscomb, Mississippi Fred McDowell, and Clifton Chenier, artists whose influence on American music far outweighed their commercial exposure. His work was less about fame and more about truth, capturing the raw, lived experiences of musicians on the fringes of mainstream recognition. Strachwitz's death came at a time when questions about cultural preservation, authenticity, and the commercialization of heritage music were more relevant than ever. As digital streaming platforms increasingly homogenize musical tastes, his passing reminded the world of the importance of curatorship and care in cultural memory. The immediate reaction among musicians, ethnomusicologists, and fans of traditional music was one of profound gratitude and mourning. Tributes poured in from across musical genres, many noting how his field recordings preserved voices and stories that would have otherwise been lost. While Strachwitz never sought the limelight, his legacy has only grown since his passing. His archives, documentaries, and the continued influence of Arhoolie have cemented his place as a guardian of America's musical soul. He is commemorated not with grand statues or national holidays, but in the enduring soundscapes of the artists he recorded and the students he inspired. Strachwitz's life and death reveal how power can be wielded not through dominance, but through stewardship, through listening, recording, and honoring voices that history might forget. Humanity's relationship with mortality and memory finds its noblest expression in such acts of preservation. We immortalize figures like Strachwitz, not just in history books, but every time a young listener discovers an old song and feels its timeless resonance.